Hello, everyone. So welcome to the session about impact bonds, opportunities and challenges. So I will be animating the session. I'm Raphaël Sebag from FAIR, which is a collective of practitioners on social impact investment. And I will be talking with three panelists. The first one is Maha Keraman. She's the head of Social Impact Accelerator at BNP Paribas. She is working on social impact bonds in France with her team, and they have invested in 11 impact bonds so far in France. The second panelist will be Virginie Arnaud-Lepape. She is an investment officer in AFD, the French Development Agency, and she has worked and launched on the first development impact bonds led by a French institution in the world. And the third panelist is Thomas Bosetti. He's the coordinator of the LC program at Médecins du Monde, LC, which is the biggest and the latest social impact bond in France that was signed earlier this month. So I will be giving the floor first to Ma. And Ma, hello. So I would like to ask you first, for the beginners on the subject, if you could describe what is a social impact bond and how it works, and what are the main specificities of the financial product.
Okay, hello everybody. So indeed, an impact bond, social or environmental or development impact bond is a contract which is between few stakeholders, three main stakeholders, and it is meant to enable actors from social and solidarity economy, like NGOs or social enterprises, social businesses, to experiment innovative social projects. And the way to experiment that is to have a pre-financing from private investor, which would assume the risk of failure in terms of impact of the project in exchange for a success fee. How does it work? The project is deployed, and there is an independent evaluator who will measure the KPIs of impact that are actually given by the project on the field. And if those KPIs are met, then you have a state, which can be a municipality or a ministry or other public authorities, who will reimburse the investors and even give them a fee, a success fee, if the KPIs are met. So it's really a product that is only based on the impact results that are generated by the project. So it's quite innovative, it's quite disruptive, it's quite ingenious too, because it's also built on the philosophy that a social provider, when they have an experimentation and they have a social program, they actually avoid costs to the society. And these costs avoided for the states are then redistributed as partially to the investors that took the initial risk of performance.
Thank you, Ma. Maybe in a few words, you can tell us in what kind of projects these social impact bonds can be made.
So the impact bonds are usually used for projects where innovative projects where the proof of concept is not made yet. So there's no recurrent revolving financing from the state. So it's to make the proof of concept. They can be used also for preventive projects. It means when having a preventive action is much better than waiting that some social problem occurs and then to have to cure it, because it's much more expensive to have to cure it afterwards when it happens, rather than to prevent it upfront and which is less costly, and of course, which has a much less impact if you do it when the bad impact is already on the beneficiary, on the final beneficiary. It's much more difficult for him to get out of this situation than if you prevent it. So it can be used for example, in health issues. It can be very interesting for health issues. I think we're going to have an example of that. It can be used on education, also projects to prevent, for example, dropout problems upfront. It can be used to prevent childhood placement in childhood protection, to avoid placement in foster care. We have an example of that too. It can be used for it can be used to prevent unemployment. So, and it gives a very good feeling of the trajectory that leads to a certain problem. So, so I think this is those are the main type of projects where you can use impact bonds.
Thank you a lot. So you're working at BNP Paribas, and I would like to ask you why BNP Paribas got involved in this social impact bond, and what are you doing exactly?
So as you see, it is a product it's in an innovative financial product, and so this is interesting to see how a financial product can actually have a concrete impact. It's one of the few products that actually completely link the financial profitability to the impact that is generated, and they are both correlated. So it's very interesting for us from this innovative point of view. Also, it's a multi-stakeholder contract. So for BNP Paribas, it was interesting to have all the ecosystem where we usually are as a bank. We have social businesses as clients. We have investors that want to have an impact. We have public authorities as clients. So it seemed quite coherent to have this place within our ecosystem. It's very similar to financing, to project financing, which we do. Usually we structure a lot of finance projects on infrastructures, for example, except that here what is underlying the underlying asset is not a pipeline or infrastructure, or it is actually a social project. So what is expected is an impact. So it was interesting also from this point of view. It's also completely coherent with what we do with social entrepreneurship. We have developed a specific approach to help social entrepreneurs to develop, and this is a very interesting tool for them because it's another way for them of financing by putting their impact in the center. So for us, it's interesting to diversify this product. And what do? We actually have two roles in those impact bonds. We structure them, which means that we help the project from the very beginning to build it as an impact bond, to do all the financial modeling, to help find a final payer, which will reimburse the investors, and to find the actual investors, and to do the contractualization. So this is the structurer role. And usually when we have a structural role, we also take a stake as an investor, so that we build on our capacity to drag other investors to those innovative financial products.
Thank you a lot, Ma. So I will give the floor a little bit to Thomas Bosetti, who is working at Médecins du Monde. And Thomas, could you please introduce us your project that was financed by a social impact bond? What was its history of development? How did you decide to get involved in social impact bond, for example, and what does it bring to the project?
Okay, Thank you. Hello, everybody. So I work for the NGO Médecins du Monde, Doctors of the World, like we say in English. And I coordinate the development of this alternative since 2016. And first, you have to know that this NGO work against all forms of discrimination and exclusion to health. And in France, we know that several studies show that psychiatric disorders are overrepresented in the incarcerated population and also in the homeless population. And in the town of Marseille, who is in the south of France, we estimated that there is between 90 and 300 people living without housing and with psychiatric disorder who are referred to immediate court per year. And every year we have 2,000 people who are referred to court to this kind of procedure, who is a very fast procedure. It's very difficult to know what the people needs during this procedure. So these people who have the two problematics, psychiatric disorder and lack of housing, go to jail most of time. So the solution we propose is to allow magistrate to pronounce alternative to incarceration for litigants living with these two problematics, psychiatric disorder and without housing. It's like a principle of jurisprudence, therapeutic jurisprudence, who is developed in several countries in the world, like United States or Canada. So when we met the magistrate, they were very interested in a proposal that took into account the basic needs of people in order to propose this alternative in accordance with the French law. In the law, it's for 1 year. When you have to go to jail for less than 1 year, actually, comment on dit, la peine, the case must
The sentence.
The sentence must be outside of the jail, and for those people with very big needs, it's not possible. They go to jail. So they were interested to see that Médecins du Monde come with a consortium of other associations to address these specific needs, to make this possible. Also, the magistrates were very interested in the way that we propose a scientific evaluation of the project. And to understand a little more the project, we can think about it like work package. And there are different work package in this project. There is two groups of work package. The first one, it takes place in the court, and the other one in the community. In the court, first, we have to identify the population with the specific needs, psychiatric and problem of housing. We have to check these criteria, and after to obtain a consent to take part of this clinical trial. And after that, we help the magistrate to pronounce an alternative sentences, so the magistrate validates the decision. And after, there are another group of work package who take place in the community. Its first is to offer an emergency accommodation as soon as we leave the court. And we have, at this moment, to ensure an intensive care coordinated with the probation services. And then we have to provide access to housing. And that's what we are going to do for a period of 2 years for 100 people in Marseille, with a multidisciplinary team composed of different workers, like a psychiatrist, a nurse, peer workers. It's very important to have peer workers in kind of project, and social workers, and also job coaches. So we will start in next January, and after I will talk how we get the financement of this kind of project.
Thank you, Thomas. And why did you decide to go to a social impact bonds?
It was a long story. We first decided to develop this project since 2009. The first funding research began in 14 without any success, and from 16 we first try to to have a financement by the European Regional Development Fund, but it was not possible also because the city of Marseille did not want to take the responsibility of this project and finally gave up applying. So it was the meeting with Raphaël and Ma started at this point, and it was we heard about social impact bonds. It was by a fellow researcher who was looking for a way to find funding for intervention and research. And it was exactly what we was looking for this kind of project. So the social impact bond was an option that we present to the board of Médecins du Monde. And to have this option was the way to construct the whole protocol of the clinical trial and to bring together all the providers. But it took a long time between 16 and now 21. It was a long process, and we were accompanied during all this process, but it was 4 years, it was very long.
Thanks a lot. So can you describe to us a little bit what is also at the core of the project, which is the evaluation model? And does it bring something to the project?
Yes, for this project, what we could do is to bring the research like a stakeholder from the project. It's not only to make an evaluation of the saving cost. It's also to understand all the process of this project. So we construct all the evaluation with a health laboratory, we used to work before, because this laboratory was experienced with evaluating the French Housing First program, and he was very familiar with the issues of mental health and precarious issues. So we discussed the indicators with them, and we construct a randomized protocol with them to, at the end of the project, to understand what works and what does not work. For that, we have to make a quantitative research, but also qualitative research, like sociological or anthropological research about what we are going to do. And with this with this impact bond, we also finance this research, which is very important to understand a very complex project.
Okay, great. And what were the main challenges that you faced for doing this social impact bond?
The main challenge was to bring all the stakeholders. That we have 4 ministries, at least, but at one moment it was with 5 different state engagement. It was to have discussion with people coming from very different topics, to speak with judicial problem, health problems, precarious problems, but at the end, everybody wants to provide a new thing about these people that we know that they go back to jail every time. So I think that the thing is going to start in January for us. Okay, now we've got the fund, but the great challenge is starting now. We are going to open I think we are going to open a great door. Maybe we are going to fail, we don't know, but we are very glad to try. It's very important to try something with this population, and also for our state to change the politics of how we manage people with big needs is very important for us.
Thank you. So what I was saying also is that social impact bond can, and the projects that are financed by social impact bond can influence the public policies.
We will see. For us, for sure, we start. I said that we try to find fund since a long time, since 14. When we signed the first document of the social impact bond, it was in 16. We can say that 4 years was very long to achieve this process. But to this date, no, I know that there is several cities in France that want to engage in such projects, but to this date, there is no one. So there is no way to finance this stuff today. So for us, the fact of starting something is very positive.
Thank you a lot, Thomas. So I will give the floor now to Virginie, who is working at AFD. So I said she's an investment officer, and she worked on the first development impact bond that was launched by a French agency. So Virginie, I will ask you the same kind of question as I asked Thomas. So the first one will be, can you describe your project and how did you get involved in the development impact bond? And maybe you can tell us in a few words, what is the difference between a development impact bond and a social impact bond?
Yes, hi everyone. Thank you for having me. So I think that the two main differences between a social impact bond and a development impact bond is who is the outcome funder. So Ma explained you that there was an investor pre-financing a program implemented by an NGO, and that the results were purchased by an outcome funder that will only advance the payment if the outcomes are achieved. So for a social impact bond, usually it's the government entities, like for Thomas project, so indirect ministries. For development impact bonds, because there's not necessarily funds available at the government level in developing countries where AFD is working, it's usually a development agency or a foundation that is the outcome funder. So that's the first main difference, that the outcome funder is not necessarily the same, but the mechanics is the same. And I think the objectives, I think I described briefly the reason why we started this project in Ethiopia, but the philosophy is the same. And I think the mechanics is the same. Another difference, or the second difference, is that for social impact bond, it's mostly around cost savings for the ministries. So I think it's an argument to convince an outcome funder to join this financing, is to say, hey, see, if you invest in this project now, you will have evidence that it works, and you will have evidence that you're going to save money in the future. We don't have the same approach for development impact bonds, because our goals is our sustainable development goals, right? So we don't try to make any savings for the ministries, but we try to convince that these interventions are key to address sustainable development goals. So I think that's a brief introduction. We're working on the first project led by AFD, and we are hoping to launch in 2022. And so what is our project? So it's it's a project that is dedicated to menstrual health and hygiene in Ethiopia. And how it started is in 2019, so before I joined AFD actually. AFD, so the French Development Agency and the Ministry of Europe and Foreign Affairs decided to launch a feasibility study to see if we could use this new financial instrument. So we had heard about the social impact bonds in France that were in that were happening, and also we saw that the British Development Agency was doing some in developing countries. So we were like, okay, maybe we can see if we can use this tool in an area that is really lacking of investment. Menstrual health and hygiene is not receive very few direct funding, so it's usually side fundings from other projects like water and sanitation, but rarely is the subject of financing. And there was a need for a proof of concept because there's very few studies done on the impact that improvement of menstrual health and hygiene has impacts on education, health, and also economic opportunities for girls and women in the countries where we are working in. So we, after a feasibility study, so we decided, so this project really support France's international strategy for gender equality and has received a lot of supports internally. We launched a call for projects in 2020 to select an operator. So I think this is another difference with Thomas's project. We launched a call on this topic in a specific geography with a specific budget, and we selected an NGO called Care France that is going to lead a consortium of NGOs on this innovative approach. And we work together with Care France on the impact evaluation framework. So together we said, these are the goals that we want to achieve, development goals, and how we're going to, so Care France, put together a project proposal to say how they're going to do it. And together we define how we're going to measure success. And after that, once we had this defined, we selected in the spring 2021 an investor, and we selected BNP Paribas. So we've been working with Ma on this project and her team. And we selected an evaluator also at that time that is helping us finalizing the impact evaluation framework. So the process is a little bit different, and I think what I wanted to highlight is why we decided to use this tool instead of a direct grant. So IFD is financing NGOs in developing countries, and why we decided to do it this way. I think I really want to echo what Ma and Thomas said about this instrument, is that it's really done to experiment so new intervention. So it's in our case, it's the first time that in order to improve menstrual health and hygiene, we're going to finance activities both on awareness raising and improve the knowledge on best practices for girls and boys within schools. Combined with development of local market for reusable hygiene products. And third, improvement of water and sanitation infrastructure in schools. So combining those three pillars is we hope is going to make a difference and have an impact. And we had heard about several NGOs working on this, and we received actually over 10 bids when we launched the call for projects on this topic. So we know that this is a topic that is interesting and is going to make an impact. So that's the first reason, is that experiment something that has not been done, make the proof of concept, as Maya said. I think this is why the evaluation is being done during the project. So we are going to measure at different points how successful the activities are, and Care France and its partners is going to be able to make changes and adjustments in order to reach the outcome, the expected outcome. And finally, I think you asked the question, Raphael, earlier on Thomas' project, but the influence on public policies is one of our core objective for this project. We want to make sure we develop a dialogue with local government entities so that the activities are shared. So CARE is going to explain what they are doing and what the outcomes are, and hopefully these will be they will be this project, a portion or all the activities are going to be replicated in different regions within the country. So this is really one of our objectives with this development impact bond.
Thank you a lot, Virginie. That was very clear. So I will ask you another question, which is what is the evaluation model of your development impact bond? What do you measure? Why did you decide to measure this kind of indicators? And does it bring something to the project?
Yeah, so we used a theory of change, right? And we discussed, and within the theory of change, you start with activities and you go to output, outcomes and impact. So we really wanted to be as ambitious as possible and to be at the outcome level and not at the output level. So because we want to have this public policy dialogue, we need to show that there's going to be an impact for girls and women. So we propose 3 indicators that are at this level of outcome level. One is we're going to measure the women's inclusion and mobility during menstruation. And I'm going to explain how we're going to measure those. So that's one indicator. The second indicator will measure the satisfaction of girls and women in managing their menstruation. And the third one is the knowledge indicator that will be tested on boys and girls and men and women within the communities where we're going to intervene. And so those 3 indicators will be measured by the quasi-experimental approach. So based on enquête, based on surveys that will be conducted by an independent evaluator in the treatment group, so in the town where we're going to have the intervention, that will be compared to a control group. So they will compare the progress within the 2 groups to make the case, to demonstrate the impact and the progress, hopefully. We also have 2 other indicators that are lower in the theory of change, that are more access levels. So we want to show that the intervention will increase access to menstrual health and hygiene products. So we will measure so CARE is going to distribute subsidized menstrual health and hygiene kits. So they will use a coupon approach. So it's important in this area to convince girls that they have to buy proper and adequate products. So CARE decided to use a coupon system so that we will measure if girls who are going to receive free coupons at school, are going to go in a shop and buy adequate products. So that's one, access to product, and the second one is access to infrastructure within schools. So CARE is going to, and its partner is going to are going to renovate and construct new sanitary infrastructure in schools, and we are going to measure because it's not just about having an infrastructure, it's also building a system and making sure that the toilets are going to be maintained and remain available and adequate for girls to manage their menstruation. So for example, we will make sure that there's a locker, there's a bin, there's water access for girls within schools in order to go to school when they have their menstruation and not stay at home. So this is the 5th indicator that we have. And in addition to that, I think you also do that in the social impact bonds in France, but we have additional indicators that are not going to trigger payments, but that we're going to measure to increase knowledge and again demonstrate the impacts that the activities are going to have.
Great, thank you a lot. And
what? Sorry.
Yes.
So I think these indicators are going to help CARE and its partners to achieve those outcomes. So during the period of the project, but also are going to be shared as broadly as possible, so that other NGOs and so we're going to collaborate with the Research Institute as well, in order to increase the knowledge on this topic and demonstrate the impact that investments in mental health and hygiene can have on girls and women.
Thanks. So what were the main challenges that you faced for in developing a social development impact bond?
So I think there are two kinds. The first one is that it was new. It was a new instrument for IFD and CARE. So we both discovered what it takes, and I think it didn't take us, Thomas, as long as your project, but still a couple of months. So we had like 12 months of feasibility study, and then 18 months of structuration. It's not that bad, apparently, but it's still a long time, and we did not anticipate every step. Maybe, for example, the financing structure for the NGO was something that we thought we had discussed at the beginning, and then 6 months later came back and we're like, oh, maybe that's not the right financing structure, so the pre-financing option. So I think we did learn along the way, and we will be more efficient the second time. And I think for us internally, I think it's as a development agency, it's not a natural product, because we are usually given funds to disperse as quickly as possible. And so in that case, we have to tell people here internally, no, we are actually not going to disperse right away. We have to wait until the results are, and then they are telling us, oh, but what are you going to do if CARE doesn't achieve the outcomes? So we are like wasting the budget that we were able to engage. So that takes some time to really convince people internally to go for a product that is, one, more expensive, because we have to pay this success fee that Maha mentioned with public funding. So it's not something that is necessarily understood by everybody, but this success fee reward a risk that the investors are taking in the project. And I think the message that we are trying to convey is that we are trying to do much more than a traditional funding with this project. There's this, I think, as Thomas mentioned, the collaboration between these different stakeholders. I think it brings the energy, new ideas, and new ways of thinking, and hopefully we'll be able to achieve great impact.
Thank you to the three of you. And for the public, don't hesitate to ask questions. We will take them at the end. I just have one last question for Virginie and Thomas. What would be the advice you would give to a project holders that want to get involved in social impact bonds or development impact bonds? So
Thomas,
any one of you
start.
can.
Yeah.
Can
Oh,
in your experience, I rather advise against the adventure. It was very long, but it also depends on the will you have to conduct change in a specific topic. So at the end, if you are very convinced, you can go, but it depends. So the first advice is to avoid entering an impact contract if the third-party payers have not provided their participation. It was our big problem for us that we applied for a project who was not funded. It took a long time to go to the end. The second advice is really to reserve this type of funding for projects that you cannot finance, but that are anonymous in your organization with your beneficiaries and your partners. So also, if there is a risk to going in this kind of project, it's a good way to embed the finance on and the state government in something with risk is very needful for that. And as these are my principal advice. If you can do by another way, it's okay, but it's very risky, very difficult to find a way to finance it. It's for me, it's a good way. At the end, we are starting.
Yeah, so I would complement what Thomas just said. I think we hear a lot about impact bonds prospects, so people that are looking to do an impact bonds. And I think the first thing that needs to be found is the outcome funding. And I think we also had this challenge, to be honest, on our side. So we had to, that's why we really worked hard internally to say we have to commit, right, before we engage with the NGO, because we are asking them so much during the development phase. So I totally understand what you're saying. And I think it is the most difficult funding to find because we don't have a lot of subsidies. So I think foundations, I don't know, I haven't been able to convince a foundation to work with us, for example, on this, or not yet. It's still a new instrument, so some people are not sure it's going to work, and that's true. It's like an innovation. It's a financial innovation and it's social innovation, so we don't know. It takes time, so I think both of us told you how long it took us to develop this financing. We did provide financing support to Care France to help them during that phase, because they had to mobilize team staff for finalizing the intervention program. They usually do that after signing, and in that case we asked them to finalize it, to really go into the details, because we had to define the impact evaluation indicators. So they had to really go further than what they usually do before funding. They have to work on this evaluation framework. It takes time and it needs expertise, and then we have to work on all those contracts. So there's a legal work to be done, and I don't know how, Thomas, you did it, but CARE is trying to engage their board members with technical expertise to help them in that process. We also have pro bono legal counsel. Like, it just it is a big investment in time, so don't underestimate that. But I think, again, I would not advise against it. I think you have to use this instrument for the right project. So if, as Thomas said, if you find another way of finance, a direct financing, direct grants, just do it, right? There's no reason to do an impact bond if you find a direct grant funding. But if you don't, and if you want to be brave and be the one who should who show the way to others and create the path for other great projects. I think it's a really exciting adventure, a great collaboration between people who are all committed to impact. And personally, I have a great pleasure working on these projects.
Thank you a lot. Thank you for your answers. And we will take the last 15 minutes to answer the questions that we have. So maybe Ma, you can answer to most of the question because you invested in 11 of the social impact bonds out of 11 in France. So the first question will be, can impact bonds be useful for the social business?
Yes, definitely. Impact bonds is really a tool which is dedicated to social business or to NGOs, to actually structures that have impact as their priority. Why is that? Because maybe from all the discussions, the impact generation is the core mechanism, and it cannot. It is the main mechanism, and everything is around impact. So, of course, social business is the main target. Social business or association or foundations are the main how do you say, structures that are actually targeted by this tool. So yes, social, and they have a win. So it's a win-win situation, because social business, they can have first, it can provide them funding for a very long time, for at least the experimentation time, like 3 or 4 years, without having to preoccupy to ask for subsidies each year. It gives them space to innovate, because they can do their proof of concept thanks to this product, whereas there are very little financing that allow this. It is also a very good way of having a very scientific type of evaluation, to be able to demonstrate almost scientifically, the impact that they have. So it's also very useful for that, and they can experiment something of preventing issues. So yes, it is for impact, for social business.
Thank you. And we've covered the project holders, but what about investors? Why are they interested in this project, and are they interested in?
Sorry.
Do you hear me, Ma?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So why would investors be interested in projects like this and without proof of concept when it's really innovative?
Well, investors, they are interested, as they would do private equity investments in a startup. So they're interested in the innovation. They are interested to have funds that actually have a real impact. I think this is the main objective of investors that invest in that, is that they have concrete impact. It's not something that, okay, I'm going to finance. It is actually, there are, you count at the end how many people have had their situation being better, and you can measure the trajectory of this of the impact. So it's a very concrete for investors that really want to have an impact. It's a very interesting tool, and then it's a risk that they are willing to take in some kind of maybe envelope that they dedicate to their impact investments, whereby they have a risk. They also might have a return. So it's not like if they were just giving philanthropic funds, they can have their capital back, and they even can have a return on the investment. So it's a kind of a revolving also funds for the investors.
And Thomas and Virginie, if you have anything that you want to add to complete, don't hesitate to complete my answers. So the third question, I'm not sure I understand it, but maybe one of you can answer to it. Are impact bonds like bilateral call for proposals, but by private stakeholders?
I think they might have a misunderstanding. I think what you need to understand is that impact bonds is a common project between public, private, and NGO. So it's not bilateral. So so the first answer to that is it's not a bilateral funding. It's a tripartite. It's a 3 parties funding. So it can be done by a call for project from the government, who says, please do impact bonds on to solve the issue of childhood protection, to avoid children to be placed in foster care. And so you will have an NGO who will propose a project, and you have an investor who say, okay, I'm willing to take the impact risk on this project. And then there is the outcome funder, which is the public entity, who will buy the impact which is generated and reimburse the investor. So it's really a three parties funding. There's nothing.
Yeah.
That's what I
No,
understood from the question.
yeah, and that's how we did it. So that's how I explain AFD managed the development impact bond. But I think there are different ways of doing it. And so sometimes it's the NGO that is starting the project, like Thomas. Sometimes it's a call for projects. And sometimes the investor is selected earlier. At this, it's just that there are different ways, I think, of doing it. And because it's still relatively new, there's no standard yet for the good and the bad.
Yes, all the projects are hybrid projects today in the world. So maybe you know about the next question. Are impact bonds available for Indian social businesses and for validating new social business ideas or doing a proof of concept? Do you know about the Indian markets on social impact bonds?
I know that India is is a market that is quite prolific in impact bonds. I think it's maybe more development impact bonds. I think they're both. I think it's one of the countries, but maybe Raphael, you can answer this one.
Yeah, yes, there are development impact bonds in India today and on education mainly. So yes, it's available for Indian businesses, but I don't have the numbers in mind. I'm sorry.
I'm quite sure there are almost 10 impact bonds in India around that. Yeah. On education, on health issues, there are quite a few on the Indian markets.
Great. And Virginie, maybe with your outlook on development, maybe you can tell us if impact bonds are effective in an unstable political environment, and when there are some issues like corruption, for example, how do you manage this kind of problems?
Well, we are managing this financing instrument as any other instrument. So we are we are monitoring and making everything we can to avoid corruption. So we have processes that the NGO has to follow. It's not different from a traditional grant financing or any debt financing. So I think here, we are doing everything we can to prevent this from happening. And is impact bond effective in an unstable political environment? No. We are trying to have a long-term effect. So we want to create something that is going to last for a long time. So we are actually looking for stable political environments where we can create a dialogue with different ministries and agencies within the country in order to have this long-term effect. So it's actually not adapted to unstable political situation.
Thank you.
Maybe
yes. Maybe you could explain what is the financing structure of an impact bond?
Yes, so the financial structure, it's also it's a new instrument. So there is no actual, standard instrument behind an impact bond. It has been structured in many different ways according to the countries. It can be structures like a specific purpose vehicle, which is like when you do finance project. So it's like you build a unique purpose company, a small company with a unique purpose where the investor invests, and then this company only has the project as an asset within it. So it can be structured like that. It can be structured as a bond. That's how we did it in France, mostly. So you have the social business or the association who will actually issue a bond. So it's a specific bond because it's a non-recourse bond. You have investor who will subscribe to the bond. And then if and only if the KPI of impact are met, then you have the outcome funder who will reimburse the bond to the investors. So it's a limited recourse bond. You can have it through a trust, like a fiducie. That's how we did it for Médecins du Monde. You can have it as a receivable. You can sell a receivable also. So it depends on the legal structure and what is the simplest way of doing it in each country. But maybe one something that could help scale it is to have something that is a little bit more standard, that can be replicated everywhere and applied everywhere, rather than having, you know, customized experimental tools in each countries.
Thank you. And the average maturity of impact bonds, can you give us a number?
So if we say by maturity, the first disbursement by the funders, so the investors, and the last flow that they will receive from the outcome funder, we usually advise that it should not be bigger than 7 years, because otherwise it's a very long project, and it's quite difficult to have a very concrete measurements. And usually the program, the social program itself, is around 3 to 5 years.
Thank you. And the last question is about the status of the project holder. Do they have to register as for-profit or as NGO to tap into impact bonds?
I would say both, as long as the impact is their priority. What you should understand is that we are, in most cases, in national impact bonds, we're dealing with the public funding. So if you have a normal enterprise who has normal profit and who could finance themselves normally with their own cash flow, with their capital, with their equity, with equity rises, then the impact bond will probably not be accepted by an outcome funder. So it really needs to be, but it can be a profitable enterprise, but it should be on a specific project that is really dedicated to impact and doesn't have any profit that could auto-finance the project. But I would say there is no status unless the fact that the impact is at the core of the mission of the company.
And for the outcome funder, I think depends what your priorities and your strategy is in using this instrument. For us, for example, we clearly identify the public policy influence goal as a main goal. So if it's just a business, to grow a business, I think there's no impact on there's no public funding necessarily needed in the long run. So I think that's why we mostly work on social and environmental issues with NGOs.
Thank you a lot. So we're arriving, we have no more questions. We're arriving at the end of our discussion. I would like to thank you, the three of you, for all the knowledge that you gave us, all the answers that you gave us, to congratulate you also for all these beautiful projects that are aiming to change something on the social field. And well, thank you a lot, and thank you to the public for listening to us.
Yes, thank you everyone, and thank you to the GSBS for the invitation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.